We have paid off over $51,000 in just 2 years. Stick around to hear all about it. Hi friends, and welcome back. If we haven't met yet, I'm Jen, and we are tackling a $252,000 mountain of stupid debt on our way to financial freedom. We live life on a budget and talk about the ups and downs of that on this channel, so if that's something you're interested in, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and tap the bell so you'll get notified every time we put up a new video. We've paid off over $51,000 since we started living life on a budget on February 1st, 2018. To give a little bit of background, we live in the Midwest in what would be considered probably a medium, even maybe a high end of the lower part of cost of living. We own a modest home, we have a great income, but we were managing our life through payments. And by that, what I mean is we could afford the payments, and that's what we were always talking about. Oh, well, we can afford the payment, that's only $25. Oh, we can afford the payment, that's only $142. And literally, this got us into a huge mess. We are the stereotypical living life through payments. We fell for it every time. And then Matt, my husband, got sick and we couldn't make all of our debt payments. He ended up being off work for 10 whole months and things got ugly really fast once the checks stopped coming in. In fact, we realized that once his payments stopped coming in, that his salary was paying for our debt every month. So how do we go from that to managing to pay off $51,000 in the next 2 years? First of all, we started living life on a budget. I mean, there is just no getting around that. And actually, I love my budget. I love doing the budget every month. And I know that a budget gets such a bad rap, but I cannot stress enough how incredibly important of a tool it is. And it is so incredibly freeing to know where your money is. It's so empowering. And that's the thing, we had no idea where any of our money was going. We had this really nice income, but we couldn't afford anything. I was terrified that we weren't going to be able to live on just my salary. And that was not the case at all. Once I put everything on paper, I sat down and went through everything and put it on paper. I'm not kidding you. When you hear people say they got a raise when they went on a budget, that's exactly what happened to us. And I'll tell you exactly where that was in one of my later points. So what we did was we wrote out a budget every single month. It was a zero-based budget. So before the month started, like at the end of January that year of 2018, I wrote out a budget for February. I hadn't had one in 9 years, but I wrote out what I thought it was going to look like. And that's what we tracked against. We, for the first month, had no clue what was going to happen. We even had some Murphy moments that happened. Like we had a house with 5 people and a fairly new baby. She was only 3 months old and our faucet broke in the kitchen. And that cannot happen when you've got that many people living in the house. So we immediately that night had to fix it. There was no waiting. And we had enough money to take care of that because we were living life on a budget that month and I knew exactly what money we had where. The next thing that we did was we tracked our spending against the budget. So we made a plan before the month began, and then once the month started, as the expenses started coming in, anything that was coming in, I was keeping track of, and anything that was going out, I was keeping track of. And by that, what I mean is not just expenses like, paying the mortgage and the utilities and buying groceries and things like that, but every little expense, including our savings and all of our debt payments. So of course, debt is going to be in there because that's an outgo, but we also tracked our savings because we were saving. Even though we were in a huge amount of debt, we still needed to be saving. So I tracked every single dollar to make sure that I knew where it was going throughout the month. We cut our expenses. So one of the first things that I did was I looked at the cable. And while we didn't cut that right away, we did start gradually minimizing that. And eventually we ended up cutting it all together. I also got rid of any magazine subscriptions that came up due, like for the annual renewal. I just didn't renew them, any of them. We just stopped. And honestly, other than one magazine, nobody noticed. Next up, we tried to reduce the cost of our necessities. So they were things that we had to have that were important, but that we couldn't get rid of altogether. So somewhere along the line, I actually got Matt to get his military discount kicked in. And sure enough, we ended up reducing our mobile bill by like $45 a month because of the military discount that my husband had available. We also figured out that we weren't using $10 worth of ink every month for the ink service that we have for our printer. So we cut that down to the lowest plan, which was like $2.99 a month. I think it's $3.18 with tax. So things like that, while it was, 10 something and now it's 3 something, $7 and then $25 for the cable, and then the $40 that you paid for the subscription, and all these things, they add up. They add up quickly, and they can really make a difference. Next up, we stopped eating out. So let me just talk about our atrocious habits when it came to food. The thing that we were doing back then that we aren't doing anymore was we were eating out at least once a day, every day, all 3 of us, without any limits. We didn't pay attention at all to where we were going, how much it was going to cost while we were there. We didn't hold back on anything. We just whatever, and we just paid for it. When I sat down to do my analysis to try to understand how much I needed to budget for food when we were doing our first budget, and I did a tab that was just for food. Just food. Any kind of food. So food was groceries. Okay, we have groceries, eating out. Anytime we stopped at a convenience store, which this was Matt's thing, his vice was stopping at a convenience store to get a drink or a snack or both. And what else? Just anytime we were spending money, vending machines at work, anytime money was spent on food or beverage, that went into the food budget, okay? I found out that we spent over $1,100 per month in the year of 2017 on food. And of that $1,100, I don't remember the number exactly, but I do believe that the amount of that we spent on dining out, so non-groceries, so everything else, I believe that number was over $700 a month. There are 3 of us. 3. It was me, Matt, and our youngest son, Henry. That is just crazy. And honestly, the times that we would cook, I remember Henry would be so excited. Oh, we're gonna eat at home? This is awesome. I mean, literally eating out got old. And when I say eating out, that would be going to a restaurant or doing takeout or doing delivery or whatever. We were nuts with how much we spent on food. And I'm spending a lot of time on this particular bullet because this was our hugest spot where we were able to make the biggest difference. So what ended up happening was when I analyzed everything, I went, okay, we're not spending $1,100. And at this point, when I was getting ready to do this, we had 2 additional adults in the house because my daughter, her boyfriend, and their brand new baby, our granddaughter, had moved in with us in November of 2017. So now there are 5 adults essentially because I've got a teenage boy. So, he's an adult. He's eating the same amount as everybody else. And I'm feeding 5 people, and instead of $1,100 for 3 people, I did $700 for 5 people. And that worked. The first month, we didn't even hit $700 for groceries. And when this all came about, so think about that. On average, it was $1,100. So some months it was more, some months it was less. $400 difference there. The $1,100 average, I decided to use $700. I found $400 in our budget right there for us. That's one of those things that made us feel like we got a raise. Okay, next up, what we did was we changed where we shopped for groceries. And this was actually kind of comical how it played out because when I went to Matt and said, hey, I know you're doing all the grocery shopping. I would like you to start shopping at Aldi as your primary store. He looked at me and he laughed and said, right, that you want me to go to Aldi? And the reason why he did that was because when I was a kid, okay, so growing up at home, I was in junior high school, my dad got a job. He was a truck driver and he got a job driving for Aldi. He was hauling Aldi groceries. And so this is when my mom started shopping at Aldi and she was bringing home generic everything and it tasted like crap. Let me just tell you, in the 1980s, the box macaroni and cheese versus Kraft macaroni and cheese, yeah, no, could not hold a candle to Kraft macaroni and cheese. And I literally said, Mom, I'm not going to eat that if you bring it home. I was such a brat. But I said that. I said, I make my own food most of the time. I'm not making that. So she stopped bringing it home. She started bringing home Kraft. Well, I had told Matt stories about that, about how I liked hardly anything that came from Aldi when I was a kid, and that I'd never shopped at Aldi as an adult, that I just bought the food that I wanted because, it's my money now and I'm going to do what I want. And, look where that got us. So he decided to take that as a challenge, and he ended up making the best of it. Let me just tell you, I ended up being able to get our budget, even with the kids still living with us. I think I had our budget at like between $550 and $600 a month. I just gradually moved it down. They lived with us for like the first 6 months that we were on a budget, the kids were living with us. And so over those 6 months, I moved it down a little bit from 700. So then I went to like 675 and then down to 650. And Matt's just keeping an eye in every dollar, because that's where we kept our transactions at the time. He was watching in every dollar to see how much do I have left. And so we went from shopping at stores like Jewel Osco and Hy-Vee, which are the more expensive stores here locally. And basically, I asked him to make Aldi be the primary. So he went to Aldi first. And then secondary was Walmart. And then if we couldn't find what we needed at those two places, we might go to Hy-Vee and get it because it's super close. That was it. I mean, we hardly ever shopped at Hy-Vee anymore. And that's what made the difference. So absolutely changing our habits about where we shopped was a huge, huge help in getting our food budget down. Now, those are some things that we did to help with the numbers. Now let's talk a little bit about some things that helped us keep it sustainable, I guess, because, going hardcore, scorched earth, whatever you want to call it, doing that for a long period of time, it is not sustainable. And that was not going to work for us. My husband is a spender, and even though he recognized the trouble that we were in and he was on board, I knew if I cut him off altogether, that was not going to go over well. It would manifest in other issues, whether it be money or something else. And I chose not to fight that battle. So instead, we had personal spending allowances for each of us. And he has done a fantastic job of staying within his means. He hardly ever goes over his monthly allowance. I, on the other hand, I'm a problem. I went a whole year. I thought he was the spender. And then I went a whole year and went over my personal spending budget every single month. Yeah, so clearly it was not only him. Actually, I think the problem was more me. We ended up, I took some action, actually, I'm trying in 2020, because I've been really noticing that in 2019. So in 2020, I'm trying to make some changes. But the bottom line is, having a personal spending bucket basically gave us a guideline of, this is what you have. So you can decide how you're going to spend your money. Now, I didn't decide. I ended up just doing whatever I wanted, which is not okay. At least I had an eye on that. I knew I was over, and it prevented me from spending more. So honestly, it could have been so much worse, I think. Anyway, so putting a personal spending allowance in place absolutely helped us to feel like we weren't so incredibly deprived. The next thing that we did was we included an entertainment category in our budget. So entertainment includes things like streaming services and family entertainment, and we have a movie club. So we have the Cinemark Movie Club, where we get one free ticket every month, and that's because we like to go to movies. So we are very selective, as the three of us as a family. We kept entertainment in the budget. So we have our streaming services, and then we had the Cinemark Movie Club, and we had $50 a month for family entertainment. We did things like we would go and buy our candy at the Dollar Tree before we went to the movie. And that way we're not buying at the movie where it's super duper expensive. So we changed our habits like that to stretch that $50 as far as we could make it go. And so it just gave us the freedom to do that. Another thing that we did was Matt and I talked about money. So not necessarily in the traditional have a budget meeting every month kind of talking about money, that's not something that we've been good at. Honestly, I don't know how to make it so that Matt is engaged in that, but I can get him engaged in other ways. So we have always talked about our money. We both come from very different backgrounds with money. We have very different backgrounds and upbringing and that kind of thing. But aside from that, the way that money was viewed in my home was different than the way that it was viewed in his home. And also, I grew up in the middle class, and he has often talked about how he grew up poor. Like, he had to buy all of his own clothes. He had to work from a very young age and buy all of his own clothes and that kind of thing because his parents couldn't afford to pay for those things. And so that's very different than mine. But I was an only child, and I had everything I needed and then some. I had some great experiences with money as a child growing up. My parents taught me everything. They taught me all the principles, and they led by example. That didn't matter for me. I did not follow their example at all. Matt grew up with no money, and so then when he had some, when we got together and now we've got these two incomes, it's just different. And when things went south, the effect on him was very different than the effect on me. It was much harder on me than it was on him. He had struggled with money for so many years before this ever happened, before he met me. I had never struggled with money like that before. And so I was really having a hard time. And it was extremely difficult for me to process that I was not paying all of my bills because I had never not paid all of my bills. And for Matt, that's something he had experienced before, and there were solutions to that, and they weren't things that I necessarily agreed with. So we had to talk through these things a lot, especially in the beginning. It was very short conversations at the beginning because he was still sick. And I have talked openly on the channel about the fact that Matt suffered from severe anxiety and depression, and it was debilitating. And I was extremely scared for my husband. He was in a really bad place, and he had not returned to work yet when this all happened. I had to do something, and so I did, and I couldn't completely do it without him. But the YouTube channel that I have today with the Budget Bounce, it's all because I didn't have a good outlet for talking about what was going on with us. Matt and I talked, what are some big things that we need to be making some decisions about and planning for now? We talk about those things all the time, but the day-to-day stuff, I just run it through the budget. My free spirit is not interested, and I'm okay with that. And finally, one of the things that we did was we just gave each other grace. And this was something that was really important. It's not a tangible thing, right? So it's not necessarily an action that you take. It's more just in how you're processing everything and how you're communicating with your partner. And, we both went off budget. I mean, at the beginning it was hard. Like, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We screwed up. We each individually screwed up. We screwed up as a couple. We made all kinds of mistakes, but anything was better than where we were. So it was all an improvement, even though we continued to make mistakes. And so when things would happen, instead of getting all bent out of shape, at the beginning, I was very like, oh my gosh, we can't do that. It's not in the budget. I was like that at the beginning. And after about 3 months, I learned that, that's not going to work for us going forward. That, especially not for Matt. If he needs something for the car and he needs to stop at AutoZone and get that, he needs to do that. And that's where our sinking funds came from, where I started adding in sinking funds, because then when those types of things happened, then we had $50 sitting in the bank for that. And so over time, what happened was we learned to adjust, and I would adjust the budget every month. Things would happen and I'd be like, oh, we better put $50 in this sinking fund for this. And I started making those things and those adjustments. And also, we would talk through it. We would make an adjustment in the middle of the month, even though it wasn't on plan and it screws up what we planned on doing, you just make an adjustment as you go. And we just didn't hold on to things I think that we have a good enough relationship that, while it's not perfect, we can work through things and we can communicate. And my husband has said from the very beginning that one of the things that he loves most about me is that he never has to wonder where he stands. And that's because I don't hold back. The thing is that he never had to wonder what I was thinking about our money. And so I told him, and he would tell me about things that were going on, and we just work through them. And you make adjustments, and then you carry on. And then when you do your next budget the next month, you take all of that into consideration. And you just think about, okay, what might happen, what might come down the pipeline, and how can we be prepared for that? Things like an emergency fund help with that, and for us, sinking funds. And we have a ton of sinking funds. So, and those have been built over the course of 2 years, and they are Dave Ramsey terms, they help my security gland from going crazy. So anyway, they help me sleep at night. Really, I've been saying that a lot lately because it's true. So those are the things that we did to meet this huge goal we didn't even know that we had. We paid off $50,000. It was $51,000 in 2 years. And we still have a huge chunk to go. We're sitting right at $200,000 right now that still needs to be paid off. And that kind of stinks. But what stinks more? $252,000 of debt. So I will take $200,000 all day long. All right, guys, so next what you want to do is go watch this video, and I'm going to meet you over there where I'm going to be talking about how we got into this mess. I talk about bankruptcy and consumer counseling. I talk about our YouTube channel. I talk about all kinds of things in regards to how we got here. So you're going to want to head over there, and I will meet you there.